Oh dear, 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 dear. Piers Morgan, what happened to thee? The truth is, Piers Morgan, who seemed very supportive of Israel at the start of the October 7th war, and now we've wondered in the last few months what's happened to him. Why has he made such a big turn on Israel? I have to say, and I've said this before, I don't think anything happened to him. I think Piers Morgan is someone, and by the way, I don't like to get into personal attacks, but when someone is attacking my people, I have to highlight the flaws in what they're doing. Piers Morgan is someone who jumps on the fastest train in town, and he saw that there was a lot of support for Israel. Well, among sane people, it was sensible to support what Israel's doing, but very quickly, when he starts to see the tide turning and all this focus on what's happening in Gaza, he felt that he had to also bat more for the other side. And he's doing that even more now to an extreme. And I want to show you this clip of Piers Morgan just yesterday hosting a debate. And I say debate in the looser sense of the term because it's really a ganging up with him and Dave Smith, comedian turned Middle East expert, geopolitical genius. I'm saying that in a humorous sense. Against Elica who she calls herself daughter of Iran. She's an American Iranian activist that's trying to speak out against this heinous Iranian regime, but she also is a fierce non-Jewish defender of Israel and Israel's actions. And she has now made a post on X or Twitter saying that she's not going to go back on Piers Morgan ever again. She's been on plenty of times and she's not going back on ever again. And I want to first show you just a clip of this so you can see kind of the direction it went and the flaws in Piers' thinking, where it's so clear he's just jumping on the anti-Israel train now. And then I want to show you what Elica said. And then I also want to show you a bit of a spat that's taken place between Piers and Elon Levy, the former spokesperson for Israel, who just got blocked on X by Piers Morgan. It was quite a revealing dialogue. So I want to take you through all of this because it's important that we understand the game that Piers Morgan is playing. So here he is, first of all, saying why he disagrees with what Israel's doing in Gaza.
My problem with what Israel's doing in Gaza is that in direct contrast to what it did in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in direct contrast to what it did in Iran, both very precise, very targeted, very successful operations, minimal civilian casualties. In Gaza, in Gaza, the strategy has been completely different. It's been a strategy of sort of nihilism, where they just destroy everything in Gaza. So I completely understand Israel's not just a need or a right, but a duty to defend its people. However, what we've seen in the last few months, with a 3-month blockade of starvation of already war-torn, impoverished people, they have lost all sense of proportion, and they are now behaving in a way that if other people were doing it to them, they would categorize as terrorism.
Okay, so let me just answer you in 2 points. First of all, let me ask you this question. If Hamas was entirely separated from the civilian population, let's say it was totally down north and everyone else, up north and everyone else was down south, do you think that we'd see these civilian casualties?
But no enemy in modern warfare has ever been entirely separated from civilian populations. It's for the birds. It doesn't happen. My brother and my brother-in-law were both army colonels, right? It's for the birds. This idea you get some clean war where civilians are nowhere near any of it, it doesn't really happen ever.
Yes, it does happen because you just used the example of Iran. You saw
give me an example where no civilians have been killed in modern warfare.
It's not no civilians, it's the amount of civilians. Right. And it is the fact that Hamas, it doesn't just embed itself, it embeds its
But there are as many civilians in Lebanon. In fact, there are more civilians in Lebanon than there are in Gaza. How was it that Mossad was able to target 3,000 members of Hezbollah with a pager device that exploded? But in Gaza, the only way to deal with it, apparently, same situation, in Lebanon, Hezbollah live amongst civilians. The only way they can apparently do it in Gaza is to obliterate Gaza and kill tens of thousands of civilians as they go after Hamas. I don't understand the difference.
Okay, let me answer the question and then you'll understand. What you're doing right now is you're not just legitimizing Hamas's strategy, you are encouraging it.
No,
because the whole...
When did I encourage it?
Okay, well, let me explain.
Elica,
and then
people
understand.
are listening to this, right?
Okay,
I mean, they know what I've said.
Piers, if you let me finish my sentence, and then at the end of it, you can tell me if you agree. Should we agree on that?
Sure.
Okay. When
And then he proceeds to keep butting in as she tries to explain it. But I want to make some extra points here that Elica didn't quite make, but I think get to the heart, the nub of what Piers is saying and why it's so flawed. I have to just sigh before I say this, because maybe it's not obvious to him. Maybe let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this is genuinely not obvious to him. Okay, let's talk about Lebanon and Iran for a second, where Israel was exceptionally pinpointed. So you can draw two conclusions from this. You look at Lebanon and Hezbollah and how Israel laced these pages with bombs that Hezbollah were using. And in Iran, they had lots of Mossad agents. They were able to get in and be very targeted in what they did. And then you look at Gaza. Much higher casualties, much more of Gaza's infrastructure destroyed. You have two options here. Either the fact that Israel's able to be pinpointing with Hezbollah and Iran, but not in Gaza, that either means that Israel simply wants to be as pinpointed as they can be, but they didn't have an opportunity to, and they are moral people that they just don't have an opportunity to. Or alternative B is Israel has a bloodlust against the Arabs of Gaza, and they want to see as many destroyed as possible. And that is what Piers and Dave Smith and many anti-Semites and others want to suggest. By the way, I can't speak for every single action that the IDF has ever done in Gaza, but I'm talking about, by and large, the strategy and what they're doing. That's the choice you have. And he has said this proves that they could be pinpointed with Hezbollah and with Iran. That proves they must have a bloodlust in Gaza. Let's just unpack this. First of all, let's talk about Hezbollah. Israel had clearly taken their eye off the ball a little bit with Hamas, in the same way that they hadn't with Hezbollah and Iran. They'd been preparing for this pager thing for a long time. The opportunity presented itself to them. It's not like every day. I mean, have you ever heard of anything like this before, this pager attack? The opportunity to be so targeted in going after Hezbollah with these pagers is one in a million. The Mossad managed to find this opportunity so they could target the Hezbollah fighters directly and avoid all these non-combatant civilian casualties. But most military, in fact, all military experts said that whenever Israel and Hezbollah have to do a head-to-head, there's going to be massive civilian casualties on both sides. But Israel managed to find this rare opportunity through a huge amount of work in order to do that. But these opportunities do not come about every single day. And clearly they didn't happen in the case of Hamas in Gaza. Number two, Hamas have a tunnel network, which means they're hidden underground. And Israel even went and sent in their own troops into Gaza in order to minimize non-combatant civilian casualties at the cost of their own soldiers' lives, to try to be more thorough and door-to-door rather than doing everything from the air. They didn't have the same opportunity. Hezbollah are not underground in the same way that Hamas are and what Hamas have built. Let's turn to Iran. He says, well, there are civilians in Iran, aren't there? And why were they targeted there? No, not in the same way. You don't have missiles, as far as I understand. The missiles and weapon storages and these things were not hidden under civilian areas in the same way that it was with Iran. Certainly their nuclear sites and facilities, because they were able to, Gaza is a very small plot of land. It's the size of Manhattan, and it's very, very urban and dense, and it's a very different case in a much larger, widespread Iran. So another point of proof that shows there's not a bloodlust here is the fact that, yes, Israel, in order to decimate Hamas and go after Hamas, it's been extremely messy. But it seems like, let's say, roughly 60-70% of the buildings in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. Why haven't 60-70% of the people? If it's all about a bloodlust. If that's what Israel's intention is. If Israel's careless and doesn't care. No. There's not been a 50, 60, 70% decrease in the population. we're looking at about 50,000 casualties, and it looks about half of which are Hamas. Now, Piers says, I don't know, how do I even know if that's true or not? Well, it's hard to verify for sure if you don't want to just go after IDF figures, because Hamas are also known to fiddle the figures, and these things also become more clear in the aftermath of war, where you can start to verify numbers and names. But you should know that in prior wars against Israel and Hamas, it turns out that what the IDF claimed and the numbers and the ratios turned out to be correct and accurate. So if it's the case that Israel has a 1-to-1 ratio, basically, of combatant to non-combatant, that is unheard of. When the Allied forces fought ISIS in Mosul in Iraq, it was about a 9-to-1 ratio. 9 civilians for every combatant, every ISIS fighter killed. So Piers is drawing completely the wrong conclusion. And then he talks about, what about the last few months where they limited food that was coming in? Israel's thinking, we've done this now for 18 months of giving in aid, which is getting into Hamas's hands. We've still got all our hostages there. We've got a genocidal enemy on our doorstep. We need to find another way to pressure them. The vast majority of the people still support Hamas, which we lament. Support of what they did on October 7th. That is changing, by the way, not because they love Israel, but because they're realizing they're not winning this. But they had widespread support. You should know, actually, Eli Sharabi, a former hostage, said, my friend went to hear him speak a few weeks ago, and he said, I was more scared of the civilians than I was of Hamas terrorists, because they wanted to keep me alive. The civilians wanted me dead. That's how much they have a bloodlust. And that's the great irony. They are the ones with the bloodlust. Many, many people in Gaza, Gazan culture, certainly Hamas, they are the ones with a bloodlust to see mass casualties. Israelis, Jews do not want to see that. Has the war been drawn out for so long? Yes, absolutely. Do I wish it could have been a lot more comprehensive and quicker? Absolutely. But if you're trying to say that ultimately this comes down to Israel being careless and having a bloodlust, why would they put their own soldiers on the line? Why would they do that? If this was about just wanting to see as many Gazans killed as possible. No, it's really sick, actually. It's really sick, and he sits there in his armchair looking all comfortable. But it's really messed up. Now, I want to read to you what Elica said about, made a post on X about why she's not going to go back on Piers Morgan, and what her thoughts were on this debate, and also a little dialogue between Piers and Eilon Levy, which is quite entertaining. But before we do that, I'm really excited to tell you about something we are launching today, and well, let me just show you the clip. I'm so excited to share with you something that I've been working on for a while. We've just taken JTV content to the next level. Introducing JTV Plus, a new platform streaming exclusive content created and handpicked by me. Get ready for jaw-dropping documentaries, exclusive interviews, insider access, and so much more. JTV Plus brings you captivating stories that will shock and inspire you. Stories that, honestly, I'm discovering for the first time too. From Israel to Jewish history to Judaism, it's all there. In exclusive interviews, you'll hear guests open up about things they've never shared publicly before. Plus, I'll take you behind the scenes where I get a lot more personal with you. By joining JTV Plus, you're not just joining an exclusive community, you're partnering with me to help JTV reach new heights. Just search j-tv.plus and join our exclusive community today. There's a link in the video description. I'll see you there. Yeah, this has been something that's been in the works for quite a while, and I'm so excited about the launch of this. JTV Plus, it's going to be a way for you to get extra content that does much deeper dives into big subjects. We've really been putting a lot of time and effort and research into this content. And it's also going to be a way to support the channel, to allow us to grow and reach even more people and invest in even greater content that can hopefully touch the hearts and minds of even more people. So I really look forward to seeing you there and joining you on this really exciting journey for JTV. But now let's go back to this whole discussion about Piers Morgan. So let me read to you what Elica said. She said, "Let me tell you why I decided that yesterday's appearance on Piers Morgan alongside Dave Smith would be my last. First, I'd spent the past couple of months being so emotionally exhausted and above that, genuinely devastated by Dave Smith's online rhetoric. It's hard to describe how much his words have hurt me alongside millions of Iranians and millions of Jews and Middle Eastern people. He repeatedly downplayed the brutality and threat of the Islamic regime in Iran, insisting over and over and over again Iran is, quote, not the threat, the US government is the threat. The overwhelming majority of 90 million Iranians know this line very well. It's the same propaganda of anti-Western imperialism used as a red herring that convinced them to take to the streets in '79 and bring in the Ayatollahs. Following that mistake, they realised this line, this rhetoric, this propaganda was complicit in one of the biggest heists of our time. For the past 45 years, Iranian intellectuals both inside and outside of Iran have exhausted themselves to try and demonstrate to the world how this type of commentary is not just a red herring, but it leads to the collapse of society, as it did for us. Imagine how exhausting and painful it is to try and explain the contours of this to the world, only to have people who discovered the Middle East yesterday insist we don't understand it. After October 7, not just Dave Smith, but many Westerners who had no familiarity with the reality of this type of propaganda were thrust to the spotlight by regurgitating these same appealing lines, having no idea who manufactured this rhetoric and to what end. Societies who have been touched by the finger of death, be it under socialist utopias or jihadist denomination, Iranians, Israelis, Jews, Venezuelans, Cubans, Yemenis, Afghans, Syrians, Iraqis, Lebanese, Russians, Chinese, even Gazans, and more understand where these talking points begin and end. That considered, what the post-October 7th discourse has revealed is that much of the untouched Western world has become so indoctrinated by the disinformation of these bad actors, who they can't even begin to understand the inner workings of, that conversations become futile. These conversations become more about winning to those whose only investment is being right, which inevitably means losing for those whose investment is survival. So when Piers' team reached out to me to join the conversation, I'll admit that I did actually ask to debate Dave Smith. The thing is, though, a part of me inside was screaming, don't do it. This man is not here to listen to you, he's here to talk over you. He's not here to understand Iran and the sentiments of millions of Iranians who do not support his advocacy for diplomacy deals that have proved fatal to them, quite literally by enriching the machinery used to massacre them. But to insist that his out-of-touch perspective of Iran, without knowing an iota of the long history that brought us here from the Iranian perspective, is truth. The whole anti-war line has been used by the regime's lobbyists for decades, the same one Dave Smith insists on now. Even court documents revealed correspondence between the regime and its US-based lobbyists in pushing this coordinated propaganda effort, which they admitted to intentionally aiming at naive Western anti-war activists as their easiest targets to induce diplomacy deals that line their coffers with hundreds of billions. The only true anti-war perspective is the one of millions of Iranians who have for decades asked not to platform this regime to the point of an inevitable military confrontation. But how could outsiders who aren't listening know this? I'll be honest. As soon as that conversation began, I was already defeated. As soon as the opening line was Piers reciting how much I think Dave Smith's talking points are garbage. I do, but that's obviously not how you start a fruitful conversation. That's how you egg on a catfight. I knew I made the wrong decision. I knew I'd be taunted, pushed and agitated, not because I have to contend with somebody who possesses an illicit amount of confidence and arrogance despite standing on the outside of our collective sentiment, but because the conversation was clearly never intended to bring him nor the world closer to truth. This is why you should always listen to your gut instinct, and I'm disappointed in myself that I failed my instinct on this occasion. At this point, coming closer to the truth will not happen through debates. Why? Because it isn't facts people don't have, it's context. Underneath the thin layer of easily accessible facts, there exists oceans of context that escape people who have never swam in our waters. Dave Smith will never, not for as long as he lives, know how much he has hurt us. These conversations will never bring the world close to truth. Truth will come to light, as it always does, but it will happen not by attacking the darkness, but through shining the light. Eventually, enough people will shine the light of truth until every corner of darkness is dispelled. So even though I won't be engaging in these reality TV-style debates, I'll continue speaking where people are interested in listening, and that have a chance of moving the needle close to truth. Until then, we may continue to face the abuse, attacks, hate and ostracization from the masses lingering in the dark. But in the words of Ricky Gervais, your boos mean nothing. I've seen what makes you cheer. It's a great line. Now, on this whole subject of Piers Morgan, and, he said, I'm just having free speech. he is platformed, as Amichai Chickley pointed out. He platforms regularly people like Dan Bilzerian and Candace Owens, and he says it's just in the name of free speech and we're uncensored. The problem is, certainly in the case of Candace Owens, who is by any measure, and it's impossible to debate this, I think, a Jew hater. That's just the theological path she seems to go down. I do think it's theological in her case. And it's very sad to see, because she's otherwise a very eloquent person. But I find that Piers gives her, he'll say, I let them speak and then I push back. Not with Candace. Often he lets her speak and she says what she says, and he moves on. He doesn't push back when she says heinous things. So Amichai Chickley said, it seems that Piers Morgan is struggling to understand why I claimed he's become a leading global platform for spreading conspiracy theorists and Holocaust deniers. So let's take a moment to examine a few statements made by one of his preferred guests, the anti-Semitic Holocaust denier Candace Owens. Let's begin by substantiating my claim in the interview about denying Mengele's sadistic experiments for which there is solid documented evidence. And then he goes on to list all these other examples. But Piers Morgan responded by saying, the only thing I'm struggling to understand is why you're still a government minister given the staggering number of Israelis who have contacted me to say you're utterly useless. So Elon Levy responded by saying, you really don't see the problem with your frequent platforming of Holocaust deniers. Don't get me wrong, you're perfectly balanced. You have anti-Semites from both the left, right and the left. Great line. But then Piers Morgan replied saying, hush, you little twerp. You were too extreme even for Netanyahu, which is why you got fired an Israeli government spokesperson and why we won't have you on Piers Morgan. So then he said the following. By the way, Daniel Rubenstein had a good line. This is the first time I've ever heard you say there are people too extreme for you. You had Kanye West on your show last month. Is he more of a centrist than Elon Levy? But then Elon said, Piers, maybe you should ask your bookers why they keep asking me to come on. I have the receipts. And then he shows receipts of recent communication, very recent communication, where they're asking him to come on Piers Morgan. And then I'm pretty sure in the aftermath, Elon said that he's now been blocked by Piers Morgan. But I think that is the case. I mean, for me, the jury's out on whether one should boycott someone like Piers Morgan given his level of influence. But if he's not interested in a meaningful conversation and he's looking just to attack, look, there is an opportunity to still make your case if he'll let you get a word in edgeways, but it seems a little tricky to me when it seems like his interest is not primarily in truth, but in views, basically. I'm so excited to share with you something that I've been working on for a while. We've just taken JTV content to the next level. Introducing JTV Plus, a new platform streaming exclusive content created and handpicked by me. Get ready for jaw-dropping documentaries, exclusive interviews, insider access, and so much more. JTV Plus brings you captivating stories that will shock and inspire you. Stories that, honestly, I'm discovering for the first time too. From Israel to Jewish history to Judaism, it's all there. In exclusive interviews, you'll hear guests open up about things they've never shared publicly before. Plus, I'll take you behind the scenes where I get a lot more personal with you. By joining JTV Plus, you're not just joining an exclusive community, you're partnering with me to help JTV reach new heights. Just search j-tv.plus and join our exclusive community today. There's a link in the video description. I'll see you there.